Good morning and welcome to Monday Patriot Radio News Hour. Joe and Jason, March Madness, getting ready to get the heck on out of here. My bracket, I don't know about you guys. I'm in a pool. There's like 20 of us. We were 0 for 20. We don't have a single team in the Final Four. Maybe the craziest March ever when it comes to basketball. I'm sure the network's probably not very happy. None of the blue bloods are in. None of the high seeds, all the ones, the twos, the threes, they're all out. But you know what? At this point, Cinderella. Let's go FAU. If you follow hoops at all, if you're not following hoops, listen. This morning, everything's okay. Just want you guys to know. They fixed it. And of course, I'm talking about the banks. And it's so funny because Friday they had an emergency meeting, then they released a statement that was absolutely not even worth the paper it was printed on. And of course, they want to go, oh, okay, well, we fixed it. Well, did they get rid of all the crappy money losing off balance sheet derivatives? Because that's the only way to fix it, right? Because what's the issue? Well, the issue is all these off balance sheet derivatives aren't worth the paper they're printed on. That's the problem. So if you take your deposits out of the bank and they got to sell these derivatives to be ordered to send your money to JP Morgan or B of A or whoever it may be, well, they just start losing more money. They haven't fixed anything. Listen, this problem's just getting started. Here's the good news. We've got gold down today. It's buying day. This is anytime. I'll just say this for the immediate future. And the immediate future really is probably all the way through the end of this year. Buy gold on down days every time. It's going to be a game-winning strategy. They have fixed nothing. They may have, for a day or two, Jason, they may have stemmed the tide. But again, like I said, unless they can turn these money-losing derivatives into winners, we've got the same problem. It's a simple math problem.
Correct, Joe. And the system as a whole is not faring too well, especially with the debt levels at where it's at. So that's why they have the no-win position of raise the rates and crash the markets, or lower the rates and print and inflate this thing out of existence. So they're going to pull whatever games they're going to pull to kick the can further down the road. But we'll be here watching as gold will, either one of those circumstances, gold will go up because people have a flight to safety. They go to things that have real value, and that's going to be gold.
Yeah, and it's really interesting as we're watching all of this play out because the situation is something where were they, right? People are asking the question, I thought this wasn't supposed to happen again. We've got the regulations in place and Dodd-Frank, and we fixed it. Remember what they promised us. Listen, we don't have to worry about a too big to fail bank anymore, because now we've got it set up where we can wind them down and everything's going to be fine. There's no systemic risk. And really what we found out, Jason, is the problem now is even worse than it was during the financial crisis, because now you got banks that, well, let's face it, 170 billion, anything over, $100 billion is a big problem now. So today, by the way, how did they fix it today? Well, they got out more newspaper. Yep, they got out more newspaper. The Fed's balance sheet getting even bigger today. This is an attempt to solely try to save First Republic. They're granting them more access to the Federal Reserve window. And we've talked about it. Eventually, you're going to have to clean the sheets. No amount of newspaper is going to fix the problem. 800-951-0592. That's our toll-free number. Of course, allamericangold.com is the website. It's Monday. Normally, we have Joey with us on Mondays, my son from Northwestern Mutual. He's actually getting, I don't know, another one of these licenses. By the time he's done, he'll be able to do everything and anything under the sun. But he's like, Dad, I can't do it. I got to get another license here, taking some other exam. So he won't be with us today. But he did want me to pass this along. And this is something I think a lot of people need to think about. And this one's going to be about money markets. You need to be careful, because remember the last time too, one of the things that the money market accounts broke the buck, but they pay a good rate of return. They do. Right now, Northwestern Mutual's money market accounts are paying 4.5%. But here's the thing that makes them different. They're not a bank. They're actually regulated under the insurance industry. Nobody has more cash on hand than Northwestern Mutual, not JP Morgan, not Bank of America, none of them. They bring in over $1 billion a month in insurance premiums. This is why they're the only financial institution in the world that's rated AAA. Right? They're saying, hey, they're actually maybe a little better, right, than our own government, and our government's got a printing press. You may want to consider joining their money market accounts there, taking it from your bank and moving it over there. If you do, give Joey a call, 602-909-9048. And when we get back, man, we got a lot of ground to cover. This little banking crisis, this is the beginning, unfortunately, not the end. Patriot Radio News Hour. We'll be right back. Who would have thought? Here we are, Patriot Radio News Hour, Joe and Jason. And one of the great selling points, hey, we're not a bank, right? Your money is safer with us than it being in the bank. That's where Joey comes in at Northwestern Mutual. Of course, he does everything, right? He does the insurance side, planning side, does the insurance side. I don't know, he's getting some other license now. I mean, by the time he's done, he'll be able to do everything for you from A to Z, building relationships for decades. But you know what? Looking at the markets here, the Dow was up really nicely this morning, not mixed now. The Dow's still up 120. The S&P's up 7. The NASDAQ is down 23. Gold at one point was down like almost $40, down $23 now, 1960. Silver not as bad. They're only down 17 cents here, 23.07. If you're looking for another place that isn't a bank, check out our friends at Invest Y Refi, up to 10.25% returns, not correlated to the stock market. You've heard us. This is something where you know what you're going to get every single month. You don't have to be afraid to look at your statements. You don't have to be afraid to look at what's going on with your Y Refi accounts. Check them out. Invest, the letter Y, refy.com, or call them at 888 Y Refi 24. And Jason, just a ton of things out at All American Gold. You can listen to them at your leisure. But people telling you something that we've been telling you all along. Listen, the FDIC doesn't have any money. The Fed is printing money, yet they're trying to tell us, oh no, we're fighting inflation. I told you already, this is another major policy mistake. How many more mistakes do they get? Even the White House now is starting to wonder, maybe Janet Yellen doesn't know what the hell she's talking about.
Yeah, Joe, and I guess if the debt wasn't 32 trillion or whatever that level is, maybe it would be a huge mistake. They probably drop the rates and go right to it. But I think they are at a point, Joe, that the mistake you're talking about is kind of they're almost stuck with having to do something, right? If they drop the rates and start printing, we're going to have inflation like crazy because everybody's going to need the money because the debt will go up, the interest on the debt will go up, and people aren't going to be able to afford their everyday lives. So it is a mistake, but what other choices do they have? I mean, I guess stop raising the rates, right? And then what the next thing is, well, emergency, let's just lower the rates, and then it comes to printing more money. It's really a catch-22. There's really no good place for them to go. They're at the end of the line with this phase in their monetary system. I mean, 1971 really was a bankruptcy, Joe, that started this, and we're kind of at the end of it, aren't we? That's just there's nothing more. They have to reset it, and that's going to be a painful thing for a lot of people on the bottom end.
Yeah, this is something, and again, we've said it before. There is no good option here. But the thing about it is you have to remember they're the ones that put themselves in this position. Let's not forget that. And too many times people want to gloss this over. No, this has been 15 years of policy mistakes. 15 years. And actually, now what, even longer than that, of just nothing but flat out policy mistakes. Everybody and their brother wants to know, where the hell was the San Francisco Fed with Silicon Valley Bank? How did this happen seemingly without warning, without oversight? KPMG was the auditing firm. They gave them a 2 thumbs up like 45 days before they went under, right? We've seen this play out over and over and over again. And if anybody thinks that they've fixed this problem, you just don't know what you're talking about, because here's the reality. Like I said, this is just simple math. This is actually a lot different than 2008. 2008 got complicated. 2008 had a lot to do with housing. This doesn't have anything, well, it's gonna, not yet. This didn't have anything to do with housing. This didn't have anything to do with commercial real estate. This didn't have anything to do with treasuries. This had to do with simply the fact that the banks are built on a house of cards, and because of your own decisions. I didn't make these choices. You didn't make these choices. We didn't leave interest rates at 0 for 15 years. We didn't lie to all of us. And remember, how many years did they go tell us when we just, gosh darn it, shucks, we just can't get the 2% inflation? Man, I don't know what to do. Remember that nonsense? Of course, now think about it. Of course, we know why they couldn't get to 2% inflation. They don't track inflation. None of their numbers actually tracks inflation. They stopped doing that. Listen, you know what? They stopped doing that in the 90s. Alan Greenspan, think about policy mistakes. Guess what? Oh, you know what? Let's just change. Here's the problem. Problem is inflation is running roughly 4 or 5%, because that's what it was. And that's just not working for us, because it's going to make Social Security broke way sooner. And by the way, we already knew there was no trust fund, right? That's just a flat out lie. Doesn't exist. So they said, you know what? Let's just change it. It's a brilliant idea. And guess what? Everybody went along with it. All the media guys. And you know what? This was even before, cable TV existed. But I don't even know, if the stock channels had even started yet, because they did this in the early 90s. Yeah, they just changed the math. Right? They started saying stuff like, well, if ground beef gets too expensive, they'll just buy pork. So therefore, there's no inflation. Stuff like that. Oh, believe me, that's exactly what they did. How about rent and mortgages, housing? Hey, you know what? People that own their home, they usually really don't have their finger on the pulse of housing. So let's create, and think about what they had to go through to do this. Let's create what we call the rent equivalent. What the hell is rent equivalent? Right? You're paying rent. Listen, there's only two things that exist. You got to pay your mortgage or you got to pay your rent. And really, we can argue whether you're really just renting on both of them. But that's for a different show. That's it. That's all there is. And either it costs more or it costs less. Well, you know what? That's not good. Because they do. Well, you know what? It always costs more. So what we're going to do instead, and I wonder how long they've been calling these homeowners. Hey, and here's the question they ask them. And this is, and it's all about how and what they ask. They don't ask them, hey, what do you think you could rent your house out for today? They don't ask that. Because guess what? A smart homeowner may know. Oh, man, right now, man, I can get $5,000 a month on this thing. They may know that answer. Instead, they ask them, hey, I know you own your home and you're making your mortgage payment. What would you rent your house for? You know why they ask it like that? Because most homeowners are going to say what? Well, I'd rent it for maybe my mortgage payment, right? I'm not going to sit there and say, hey, my mortgage is $2,000, but I would pay $5,000 to live in my house. They're not going to say that. And this is kind of all the tricks that they've used. And they did it decades ago when none of us were looking, and they're still doing it today. So it's kind of laughable when we're sitting here talking about the Fed wants to get back to 2% inflation. And literally, I'm telling you, it's a policy mistake because they're going to bring down the entire financial system, even over the weekend. It was either Morgan Stanley or JP Morgan, one of those two. When is the Fed going to pick financial stability over inflation, Jason? Which kind of leads you to what you were saying. If they quit, and most people now are expecting the Fed to start cutting rates by June. I don't know that that's true, but I'm just telling you what the bankers want. If that's the case, Jason, we are going to be in I think, an inflationary world that makes the 70s look like good time.
Yeah, you mentioned early on when you were talking there about 5% inflation per year. I mean, that is what the inflation has been for, decades. I mean, if you look at money, the funny thing is all inflation is money creation. That's really all it is. And if you look at the money creation for the last couple of decades, except for 2020 when things blew up, and then around 2008, it's 5% a year. The money supply has been increased 5% a year pretty steadily for a long time. And then 2020 rolls along, and then you got 40% of all the money ever created that year. And Joe, I think we're still suffering from the inflation of that. I think it's a tremendous pill for the country to swallow because it's going to take a while for that to come through. And so, yeah, they don't have a good choice because off of that money creation right before that, they had 10 plus years of 0%, right? They tried to raise it once there in the middle, right? For a little bit, and things got bad, and then the repo market started going crazy, and then here comes the coronavirus emergency, and then print. So it's a bad situation. It's very, very bad. The inflation, I think, will subside a little bit because inflation never just kind of roars in all at once and stops. There's usually hilltops and valleys when it comes to inflation. So I just wonder, Joe, at the end of the year or the beginning of next year, I think the inflation gets really hard, really bad. What are they going to do then? I mean, they're going to lower the interest rates in the middle of the year or later this year, and then what? Have the inflation come roaring back at the wrong moment for them? They could really shoot themselves in the foot by lowering rates.
Yeah, and again, I think that's almost a foregone conclusion. Because here's the simple realities. They have to. They won't have another choice. The banking crisis that is upon us today, this is just an extension of 2008 because they didn't fix it then. And now I just think about this. we had Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank go under. About $250 billion. Now, of course, you have all that was deposits. Of course, the securities behind them. Remember, we told you Silicon Valley Bank, they needed to raise $20 billion because $20 billion of deposits was leaving their bank. And they had to sell just under $22 billion of securities. So in other words, they took a $1.8 billion loss, which at a bank for that size is astronomical, right? I mean, JP Morgan on $1.8 billion loss would not be good, but they could afford it. Obviously, Silicon Valley Bank couldn't. And the fact of the matter is when they did the math, right, the bank was going to be left with what? Negative, I don't even know, 50 billion. I mean, it was a big number. And we're sitting here watching all of this. And again, I think the big problem here, Jason, is all these securities that all these banks own are all underwater. And now they're worried about, guess what they're thinking, the shoe that may do it? Maybe commercial real estate. Maybe what starts the next leg of this. We're going to talk about that next. Patriot Radio News Hour. Don't touch that dial.